Hey guys, I'm Raquel. Thank you for watching. This is lecture number 3 on tipping points. Let's just get straight into it. We have a lot to cover today. A tipping point, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, is a critical threshold beyond which a system reorganizes, often abruptly and or irreversibly. We have these 16 vital ecosystems on Earth that work together to create a climate that can sustain life. The Amazon rainforest, the Greenland ice sheet. These areas are crucial for us to be able to support life, and they rely on each other to function. They're very interconnected. Since the Holocene, almost 25,000 years ago, we were allowed this amazing opportunity to live in a fairly stable environment. We've had the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, we've had our now tech revolution. We've had this environment that's allowed for so much of human development and human acceleration, but now it's becoming something where we're reaching these points, tipping points. These areas are showing weaknesses, and they're showing that they're not able to perform the same functions that we once had. Terrestrial ecosystems like forests, they absorb 30% of man-made fossil fuel emissions, and the oceans absorb like 90% of man-made heat. So these areas are crucial for us because we're putting so much into the environment. We kind of need them to support it by absorbing it, like the carbon that we put out all the time from burning fossil fuels. And these things are called carbon sinks because they absorb carbon more than they let it out. While a carbon source, would be anything that gives out carbon. There's some areas on our planet, part of these 16 main vital areas, that are experiencing weakening symptoms that show scientists that they're not operating like they always have, and they're showing that they're starting to break down. Number one, the Amazon, referred to as the Earth's lungs, because it has this incredible ability to absorb carbon, and it actually creates 20% of the Earth's oxygen. So we have this amazing source of oxygen that is being cut down at a rate of a football field every second. And most of the time, that deforestation and degradation is done for cattle herding, for meat production, soybean production, for animal feed. Also, places are deforested for logging, for, paper products and stuff like that. And, people burn down these areas to clear them, which creates CO2 as well. The smoke alone creates CO2. And if you're unaware, right now, there are so many areas of the Amazon that are burning right now for these very reasons. So the impacts, there's a long list. Like, the species are being harmed, habitats are being lost, indigenous peoples are being murdered, literally pushed off their own land that they've been stewarding and protecting for years and relying on for years in peace and harmony. We're having a huge increase in CO2 emissions from the Amazon now, where it's not a carbon sink anymore. It's performing like a carbon source. And trust me, we do not need any more carbon in this environment. We're already overloading our environment and our earth with carbon from our emissions from fossil fuel burning. Essentially, these things tipping into their carbon source or being something that no longer performs a function that helps us, it accelerates us closer to collapse than we thought before. And they estimate that collapse is possible at 20 to 25% loss, and we're at 17% loss. That's like a fifth of the Amazon being lost in the last 50 years alone. These are things that are so crucial for us to pay attention to because they're needed. They're critical for our survival. There's also the AMOC. It's the Atlantic Meridional Overturn Circulation that allows for cold water to enter the southern hemisphere and for warm water to enter the northern hemisphere. And it basically keeps everything at a stable balance. It's also a convection of salinity. So we have salty water, we have fresh water. It allows for the function of all these different water systems to operate at a stable level. This is crucial for our planet. Our planet is majority water. So when that thing gets fucked up, we're fucked. You know what I mean? Because the planet is majority water. If that's not able to function at a stable level, then there's a lot of other things that, like we said, because they're all interconnected, they also respond to that being corrupted and that having its issues. There's signs that it's slowing down. The AMOC is slowing down because we see the Gulf Stream is getting closer to the shore. We're seeing sea level rise. We're seeing salinity changes. Areas that were once very salty are now freshening. They're losing their salinity. And these are all signs that the AMOC is not functioning like it should. At this point, there's a 90% confidence that the AMOC will collapse between now and 2090. More specifically, in higher confidence, between 2037 and 2064. These are based on comparisons to previous events where the AMOC was weaker. So we're using climate data. We can get into all those different methods and practices of how they find those things, but we're going off of data of tens of thousands up to hundreds of thousands of years where we've never seen human civilization along with an AMOC that is at that weak state. The implications are going to be severe for humans. Maybe in a planet where we weren't here, that it didn't really have that much impact, and maybe on like small life and stuff like that it did, but for us though, it's going to have an extreme impact. Summer heat in Europe is going to be insane. We're already seeing major heat waves that have killed people. We're going to see rapid sea level rise. I don't know if you guys know, but Poland right now is underwater up to its roof. And that's also from higher global precipitation as well. Greater rain events that drop a month's worth of water in one day. Things that are just so abnormal and just completely absurd to think of in a stable environment. And, you know, extreme cooling in a certain area, because in the AMOC, there's a little like cool like pocket that's created that if we were to destabilize the AMOC, it would basically make majority of the upper northern hemisphere, like northern Canada, northern Europe, like 20 degrees colder, 20 degrees Celsius colder. So that will affect farming. That will affect living intensely, because how do you grow when your winter season is majority of the year, when the warmest temperature you get is like 5 degrees Celsius or 10 degrees Celsius? And monsoons failing is another impact, because the more destabilized weather that we have, it's just the less we're able to control farming and growing seasons, and it just becomes extremely difficult to produce food in that way. So these are really serious impacts, extremely serious impacts. And overall, scientists are noticing that there's a breakdown of the fundamental areas of society the more our Earth warms up. There's 16 areas that if we enter certain thresholds of temperature, they start showing signs of collapse, and they start showing signs that they're reaching their tipping point. And because they are all interconnected, it kind of hits this domino effect. Scientists are aware that one thing will lead to the collapse of another thing and the collapse of another thing. The biggest domino block, the red block, is the disintegration of Greenland ice sheet. That is the main thing people think is going to be the initiator of these cascading effects, because as the earth heats more and the Iceland sheet melt and the Greenland ice sheet melts, we're seeing more fresh water enter the ocean, which decreases the salinity, and that affects the AMOC. We're seeing a change in precipitation. So there's going to be greater drought around the world, and then greater rain events. Just the intensity of all of the Earth's weather is just going to be way higher. As a result, the next cascading effect, the next domino that gets hit, is the Amazon rainforest, because it begins to start drying out. And the function that it is, which are lungs of our planet, it begins to not be able to do that. There's barely any media coverage about this. And any media coverage that there is, it's like passing, like barely gets any shine. If you watch the news, even like the election that's going on right now in the US, I rarely hear them talking about the fact that these are known things that are happening right now. We are approaching the tipping point. Scientists warn that a crucial ocean current could collapse. Physics-based early warning signal shows that AMOC is on a tipping course. So these are like huge alarm bells. Like they should be at the top of every topic in these debates and these conversations, but they're not. And we know why, because the agenda really is fossil fuel proliferation. It really is like keeping fossil fuel, but fossil fuels are killing us. Quite literally. I know I talk about collapse a lot on this channel, and I don't really specify as to what ways collapse would show up. It's a weighted word, but it's because there will ultimately be a collapse and a breakdown of the systems at which we take for granted right now, because they no longer can function in the new world that we're heading into. They believe that within a year, resource allocation and financial markets are going to change completely. Fossil fuels being the main currency of our economy and our GDP has to change. So we need to be advocating for fossil fuel divestment. We need to be advocating for fossil fuel prohibition, completely gone, fossil fuel gone, because it has such damaging effects on our environment. Like, it's the main culprit. It literally is the main culprit. Within 5 to 10 years, we're going to see tighter leash on all the industries that are extremely fossil fuel intensive. I can imagine flights being something that people aren't able to access easily anymore. Cars being something that we have to carpool more, take more buses or trains. Things where we have these small things that we take for granted of using propane gas and energy like that. We're not going to be able to have access to that anymore because we need to start considering the carbon budget more. Most production and storage systems are going to have to see a major change. Energy cannot be produced and stored in the same way that we have done it for the last 100 years, because it is basically confirming a unlivable future. So it is inevitable that we have to start cutting out these fossil fuels in our industries and in our economies. Within the next 10 to 30 years, there's going to be a lot of policies and regulation changes. So removing fossil fuel subsidies, education systems will be more oriented around climate education, which I love because I love being a part of that. And I hope in the future that I can do that for younger folks as well. Kids are going to have to learn, like, this is what sustainability is. This is what it means to be autonomous and have your own resources and be more self-sustaining. They're going to start learning about those things a lot earlier. And maybe, farm kids and kids who grew up in country, they might know those things. People, maybe indigenous kids, people who grew up around the land and can operate within the land, their knowledge is going to become even more important. And we're already seeing that. A lot of people are pivoting towards how to become more sustainable, how to have your own this, and that's what the journey I'm on as well. So I know that this is happening. And 30 years and more, we're going to see customs, norms, religion, norms and values are just going to be changing. We're going to have to start adding more awareness of the implications of fossil fuels. And further, and my own take from this, it's not on the diagram, but I think we're going to have to start looking at how capitalism and how just extractionism and consumerism and all these things are not sustainable practices for our planet. It's incredible because, there's so many communities that have been trying so hard. Indigenous communities have been trying so hard to be protectors and advocates for our environment, and we've just completely taken away their right and their power to do that. And it's crazy how we're going to have to start moving towards that to hopefully save something for us to live in and to survive in. The more we innovate towards these things is the more stable we get. So it's almost imperative that we begin moving ourselves towards these things so that we can actually reach some sort of stability that we can maintain, because it will be a new world and we do need to adapt ourselves to be a part of that new world. Overall, this rapidly intensifying area has biophysical impacts, of course, like the environmental stuff, but it also has socioeconomic impacts, because already in 2023 alone, we've had 12,000 climate change related deaths. 12,000 people have died because of climate change. And that's like something that's really crazy to think. And they also project that it's going to be 1 billion, 2 billion people that die in the next 15 to 20 years because of climate change. There are implications that are going to be seen, felt, heard closer to home than you ever might think. They suspect by 2050 there's going to be 18% loss in GDP. Huge chunk of the GDP is going to be affected by this. It's not something that we're going to be able to sustain in the current economy that we have. And at this rate, if we continue using carbon the way we do right now, we're going to have used our budget that we have to not reach that threshold mark in only 5 years. So in only 5 years, if we maintain the same usage levels that we have right now, we would have reached a point that we cannot come back from. It's dire. It's dire. And inevitably, there's going to be a period of overshoot where, because there's so many systems that are already in place that are going to be really hard to change quickly, we're going to go past the 1.5 degree Celsius mark that the IPCC states as our limit. We're going to go past that. We're going to go to 1.8 degrees Celsius. That will happen within 5 to 10 years time. So within 2030 to 2035, we're going to see up to 1.8 degrees Celsius in global warming. And it's 100% certainty that this will result in catastrophic events. Some major takeaways of this is that solutions are not fantasy. that really we just need like a rapid transition away from fossil fuels and towards like circular business models and circular economy models, because we literally depend on it. There's no other option, period. Healthy diets from sustainable food systems and scaling restoration and regeneration of certain areas. So like planting more trees back in the Amazon, protecting certain areas, just really trying to protect the areas that we need and will need moving forward to hold on to some sort of stability. This is necessary for the later part of this century, so 2050 and onwards. It's necessary that we make these changes and these social tipping interventions right now so that we don't go over that hill with a pace that's going to basically collapse the entire possibility of humans surviving on this planet, so we can at least reach some sort of like stable level that we can create something new and something better. That was a lot. My personal response to all this has been interesting. I never had any exact numbers and dates put to some of these things yet. I've always just kind of been like, if we get there, then this will happen, or if we go here, then that will happen. But to hear that like in 5 years' time, we would have used the budget that we need to basically be stable, or that in the next 5 to 10 years, we would have reached thresholds that are we can't come back from, or by 2030 we're going to see major systems and ecosystems that our earth relies on to function breaking down and weakening and collapsing. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And that's why I think it's so important that in all these conversations that we have about climate change and like about anything that has to do with building a better world, moving away from capitalism, from genocide, from terrorism and all these things. If we want to talk about moving forward to a better place, we need to talk about how we are abusing our planet, and ironically the planet that we depend on to survive. Moving away from fossil fuels is the only way. It is the only way. If people are going to be like, oh, that's impossible, we can't do that. You know what's also impossible? Surviving in a planet that is unsurvivable. So that's that on that. This was a lot. Hope you learned something today, and I'll see you guys next time.